Welcome, everyone. We are going to be talking about immigration with a couple of amazing individuals. We are having a conversation today with Harness and Poderistas, and we are going to be talking to Pao Ramos, who is an amazing journalist. We are going to be talking to Lindsay Toczylowski, who is the executive director of Immigrant Defenders Law Center. And we're also going to be talking to Jess Morales Rocketto from the National Domestic Workers Alliance and Karen Action. So let's see who we have to log in. Oh, Paola.
Hello.
Thankfully, so far, this has worked with one person.
You got one.
Thank God.
It's I've never done it with 4 people. So this is a first for me as well.
Yeah, and you were just down along the Texas border. You just went there as MPP was sort of being halted.
Exactly.
And for those who don't know what MPP is, would love for you to just kind of give a brief description about what that is, and so
Yeah,
we can understand what that even means.
yeah. So I was there. I was there with Vice, and we were there about 3 weeks ago. And the beginning of the story was to tell a story about what the Biden administration was doing to sort of begin the process of undoing MPP, right? The Migrant Protection Protocol, which is also known as the Remain in Mexico policy. And so one of the big staples of the Trump administration and his anti-immigrant agenda was creating this Remain in Mexico policy, which essentially shut down asylum as we know it, right? Like, we all know every human being has a legal right to claim asylum in this country and to be inside of the United States while they do that. And Lindsay there's no better person to talk about that than her. But the Trump administration essentially took that right away. And so through this Remain in Mexico policy, he essentially forced thousands of asylum seekers to remain in Mexico as they awaited for their asylum cases to be heard in the United States. And so that means that, there were over 60,000 asylum seekers at some point and for 2 years stranded in some of the most dangerous cities along the Mexican border. One of the biggest beneficiaries of Trump's anti-immigration policies ended up being the cartels themselves, right? Because as asylum seekers were waiting and waiting and waiting, not only did we create a humanitarian crisis, but we also endangered a lot of people.
The flip side of this is that what we are seeing is both increased danger at refugee camps. In some cases, people have been in refugee camps for years at this point. And that means, and Elsa and I can talk about this from experience, one of the refugee camps that we set up in Tijuana, which Elsa has supported for a long time, we had to negotiate having somebody watch for when the vans came around to try to kidnap kids. That was a real thing we were figuring out. I think sometimes people are really clear about the journey is dangerous, and then you get in detention and the conditions are inhumane, but there's a limbo that a lot of people are in for, it used to be days, weeks, months. Now it's months, years of what happens when they're waiting to cross, or they are waiting for some of their family to get out of detention, or they're trying to get reunited with people. And it is difficult to overstate how dangerous that limbo state is. It is so dangerous.
One thing that I always want to talk about a little bit is, we talk about unaccompanied minors, and there's a lot of discussion right now about unaccompanied minors who are coming to this country. But to me, that's actually a statement that kind of takes away from what we're really saying, which is basically children. We have a lot of children who are under the age of 17 who are coming alone to this country. And what can we be doing to support these children as they escape, in some cases, the direst and most dangerous of circumstances, to come here? And what are things that we can be doing? Again, this is about humanity. We call it that because that's our focus. Our focus is really on this humanitarian issue. And what are the things that we can be doing to support these kids?
One of the things that has been so essential is literally people refusing to look away from what has been happening and doing everything they can to try to understand this and to try to like break through on this issue that is very complicated and hard to understand. So that is like absolutely number one. Two, that I think is so critical is, you know, there has not been anything introduced in the United States Congress that is at all attempting to really like solve the problems of family separation and detention as like a whole. There have been a number of bills that have attempted to address like little pieces of things. There's an act in Congress right now called the Families Belong Together Act, and Congresswoman Jayapal has been really big on a number of things related to detention. But the idea of the transformation of the system that created family separation, that continues to detain and deport families, and that created the crisis we have right now, is just, that has not happened at all. Not at all. To me, the great untold story of what's happening is that there are and have been extraordinary people on both sides of the border who have done absolutely incredible, heroic, extraordinary things that really have filled in the gap of the United States government and continue to do till this day, fill in the gap of the United States government. And that really gives me a lot of hope, because I think when people think about immigration, they think about it as this intractable problem. It can never get solved. It's only getting more of a mess and more entangled. And actually, that I don't believe that, because regular NGO, you know, like nonprofits and lawyers who are like, have no money and everything is stacked against them, have done the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my entire life.
You know, what we're seeing right now is really a culmination of so many factors, and, you know, prime among them being 4 years of a degradation and dismantling of the asylum system as we knew it before, and really as we envision it should be. And I think the most important thing, if there's like one takeaway I would give people today about sort of how we're talking about particularly unaccompanied minors and them being, you know, an increase in numbers happening right now. First thing is that seeking asylum is legal. Full stop. There's, you know, nothing else needs to be said except for seeking asylum is legal. So every time we have a conversation about these kids, it has to be about that fact. And secondly, you know, right now we are seeing an increase that is not unprecedented. It's important the language we use when we talk about it. This isn't a surge. It isn't a wave. Those are terms that we use to describe forces of nature, and these are human beings. These are children, just like our own children, and our own family. And, you know, we should be talking about them as they are, which is individual human beings that should be welcomed with dignity. And I see it as our job at IMDEF, and, you know, collectively with so many allies and supporters, to really figure out a way to reimagine an asylum protection system that treats kids the way we would want our own kids to be treated, that keeps them safe, that protects them, and then reunites them as quickly as possible with their family, so that they can continue to heal and gain the protection that they deserve. Lives are at stake, and so there just is no room for waiting. There's no room for patience. And, you know, I see it as my job to continue to hold them accountable until, you know, we truly create a system, we reimagine a system that we've actually never had in the United States, that truly welcomes people with dignity, that centers the most vulnerable, and that centers those that, you know, need our protection the most.
You know, there seems to be kind of like this scarcity mentality that we're living under, right? We live in a country right now where, you know, I would say there's probably a lot of immigrants who are not supportive of kind of, you know, the kind of policies that we're discussing right now, and have this very distinct view about how their experience is different from what might be happening right now today. And I'm curious as to sort of how, Paola, maybe we'll start with you, how we kind of help bridge or have a conversation about kind of, are we going to be this country of immigrants that we have been, that many people have benefited from even one generation ago, and they may have a completely different opinion right now?
that could have been them.
My family is the story of family separation. Like literally, I'm a 4th generation American. We've been 100 years, and my family's grown up in Los Angeles and in El Paso, Texas. So a border town, and then not too far away from the border. Always been really connected to Mexico, which is where my family is from. My grandfather was deported under a government operation called Operation Wetback. And even though he was a United States citizen, he lived most of his life in Mexico because there was immigration policy that said like Mexicans were taking away jobs from real Americans. And so he was deported back to Mexico at 4 years old and spent most of his life there until he moved back here as an adult. And so I know that this is a government-sponsored program. I know what the United States government is capable of. I know how long our country has been talking about immigrants as other and not valuing both our humanity and the contributions that we make to this country. And I know how long it can take a family to right the wrong of these like sort of this government terror. For my family, it took almost 3 generations for us to regain our stronghold in the United States of America. And that was just a crossing from El Paso to, to lettuce. That wasn't traveling from a home country that's thousands of miles away. So I know that we're both capable of very bad things and we're capable of really amazing things, but it doesn't happen unless we're all pushing and unless everyone is trying to make sure that not only our government, but also our communities and our society reflect the values that we say we care about. How do you get involved? Familiesbelongtogether.org. We are recruiting volunteers right now to help support the amazing people like Lindsay who are doing direct service and legal service. We're helping recruit lots of volunteers. It's very difficult to do this work in the pandemic, so we need hundreds, thousands of volunteers to support. And we have not recruited hundreds and thousands yet because of the especially if you live in Arizona, Texas, or we really, really need you, but anyone can sign up there and we'll be able to involved. So yeah, familiesbelongtogether.org. Thank you so much.
Reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your new neighbors. When you find out there's a kid, at LAUSD, we have thousands of children in the local schools here in Los Angeles who went through this journey and are now, going to school with your own children. So make sure that you're making those personal connections. Offer to drive somebody to court so they don't miss their hearing. Offer to have them over for dinner, and really show the most, welcoming part of the United States by, your own personal interactions with asylum seekers who, if there's one thing to take away from this, are human beings who are seeking protection and seeking community.